Hello and welcome to today's podcast. We have our co-host Mikiala, who has sort of been absent the last few episodes. And in a second, I'll introduce Lydia. But Mikiala, it is so great to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back in action. I love it.
So great. Awesome. And Lydia, welcome.
It's good to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
So great. Well, Lydia, I have no idea what you're going to be talking about. Neither does Mikiala. Neither of us do. So we're really excited to hear your story. So, let's just dive in. Are you ready?
Great, let's do it. Yeah, I was thinking about what direction to go with this, and my youth ministry journey is a little bit interesting because I have been at the same church for about 8 years, but I've only been a director of high school ministry for like 2.5. But I was working in the kids program for a really long time before that. So I jumped into high school ministry and got to see these kids I'd known when they were really little, coming up into their high school years. So with that in mind, I thought I'd share just the encouragement to be faithful with the students that you have, because I think often we don't get to see like the lasting results of our youth ministry, and we go, is there a point to any of this? And I also don't have as many like funny stories as I think some people have in the bank because I've been mostly working with the kids, and those are more like cute stories. So there's such joy in getting to know these students who I jumped in with, like when I started high school ministry, the freshmen were the kids that had been like my fourth graders the very first year I'd been doing ministry. And so it was this cool combination of kids that know me and I know them, but also I don't know this version of them, and to try to create the space to get to know those actual students. They'd also had a lot of turnover in their youth director world, and so they weren't always super consistent. It felt like, man, did I like lose these kids by not jumping into this world sooner? And I had some volunteers this past summer as we were sending off our seniors who were kind of frustrated. It felt like we'd lost them. They'd kind of tapered off towards the end. We like got them all back for a senior banquet, but hardly any of them had been actually at youth group for the last 3 months of their senior year. And so we felt kind of weird and demoralized. And one of our students, her parents, one of her dad is a professor, and her mom is one of the pastors of our church. And youth group was just never quite her scene. Like, she was a good sport and came, and some of her friends were there, but she really connected with like other faith things, like Young Life or going to camp in the summer, and those were more of her faith avenues. And she was one of the people who kind of dropped off uh, as she went into her senior year. And I'd always had a soft spot for her. Like, I would take her out and make cookies and stuff when she was in middle school or even elementary school, but we hadn't had like a close relationship. And so she went to college in town, and just a few weeks ago, she texted me. It was like, hey, can you come up to campus? I really need someone to talk to. And I went, huh, I don't know what's going on there, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to do that. So I, figured probably some of the freshman loneliness is setting in, and I got to meet up with her, and we went and got sushi because that's like comfort food. And when you're a college student, you need to get like actual good food in your body. And so the thing that was amazing is, I think because she wasn't my student anymore, she felt safe to share some of the things she was going through and kind of her personal like struggles with sin and faith. She expressed needing a mentor and not really having that, and then feeling like she missed the opportunity to um, receive mentorship. And so I was there to assure her, like, no, it's not too late, and God loves you. And these are these things that you know in your head, or you should, but like, let's bring them to your heart. And so we now are meeting kind of every week, every 2 weeks. And it's one of those really delightful things where I thought that I had kind of closed that chapter with that student, and it was not as fulfilling as I had hoped it would be when she graduated high school. And then to see God bring it back around was really encouraging. So that's I mean, obviously not every student we get to have that moment with, but I think it's a good reminder to me that God is faithful and that you never know how the like consistency, even if it's kind of sporadic consistency, will materialize and how
Yeah,
God
I
will.
mean, I think it's super important to stay connected to students when they graduate out of your ministry. And obviously, you might not be able to do that with every single student, but the ones that you're connected to and the ones that keep in touch with you. For instance, I just moved to San Francisco from San Diego, and I was a small group leader for a group of now freshman boys and have been with them since the sixth grade year. And, I flew back from, I had just moved a few weeks ago and then flew back to San Diego to go to winter camp. Just got back from winter camp. So it's like I left, but then I came back for winter camp. And I also plan to go back in March and just stay in touch with them. And especially some of the ones that I'm closest with, like every time I plan to visit San Diego, I want to make sure to stay connected to them, maybe meet up one-on-one with them and just be there for as much as I can. Because just because you're no longer their youth group leader doesn't mean that you can't stay connected, because especially in that transition period, going from high school to college, it's like they're starting all over again. And sometimes it can be really helpful in that period of life to stay connected. So I don't know, Mikiala, what are your thoughts?
I just think it's so beautiful that, you talked about consistency and inconsistency. And so often as youth leaders, we can get frustrated with the inconsistency of students because they have so much going on. They're, here and there, and they have sports and activities and all these different things. But your story shows how much it's not about like their inconsistency, but our consistency as leaders, because that was something where you remained regardless of what was going on in students' lives. And so when her life became so inconsistent that it was overwhelming to her, she went back to what she knew was consistent and who she could reach out to, which I think is so beautiful. I had, students who like would go off and join the armed forces or anything like that. And then, I'd just be sitting at my desk and randomly a former kid would just appear in my doorway because they knew like the office is still there, she's still there. This is where I can find the person that kind of was cheering me on along that pathway. And that's exactly what you've been and continue to do with this person. And I love that. I love that aspect of ministry.
Thanks. Yeah, I think um, I noticed in the way the student was speaking, like a lot of, like, oh, if I'm not consistent, then I don't deserve
Mm,
like you showing up for me. And I was like, well, that's the voice of shame, and that's not of God.
yeah.
And so, yeah, thank you for naming that, how we can show up for people.
I think shame is an important word that you mentioned because so often that can just come up in so many different ways. And it's our job to be able to be like, no, 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 we don't do shame. Like there's no reflection on you as an image bearer of God that is going to like distort that. Like we just need to get rid of that right off the bat, which is so important because if you spend too much time in your head thinking about it, then you start to believe it and think, I have this shame and I don't deserve things and I feel worthless. And that's just not what God wants us to know about ourselves. So
Yes. Yeah, I have been going off a little bit about how shame is useless and not of God, and we need to like if you're feeling shame, then stop, which is not actually like helpful advice. But um I think that it's the work of the enemy, right? To keep us trapped in our heads and not asking for help and thinking that everyone else has it together and we don't and we're not worthy. And God is not actually interested in any of that like getting stuck in that feedback loop. He's interested in setting us free. And when we're out of our shame and set free, we get to love others.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a matter of a student verbalizing those thoughts because it's all internal, but then when they say it out loud to someone that they feel safe and that's a trusted person, then first of all, that's an indication for us as youth leaders to, like, speak truth into that and say, look, that is shame, and that isn't something that you need to lean into, and here's the truth. And talk and speak grace, peace, and love in their lives. Yes, that's great. Okay, well, awesome. I appreciate you coming and sharing that. When it comes to meeting with students one-on-one, I feel like that's like so important.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Mikiala, like just in your time in youth ministry, where have you seen that really be helpful for students?
One-on-one meetings. Well, I guess just as a person who grew up in ministry, even before I was working specifically in student ministry, I saw the importance of just creating that safe environment, like you were talking about. And so, one of the things that I like to do as a youth leader specifically is make sure that my office is a safe place. For those meetings, because in church work, we have the opportunity to make sure that it's like safe feeling for the student, but then safe on the, in terms of like whatever your church's policies are and procedures to make sure that you as a leader are safe and make sure the student is safe. I can make sure all of those things are in place, but then I also get to make sure that it feels comfortable for silly conversations and deep conversations. And so, my office is completely Spider-Man decorated because I believe being a kid at heart is always something that we should do. But at the same time, it's an excuse for me as a leader to be the teenager that I have always had inside of me. And, we can nerd out about certain things, but just creating that environment for those one-on-one conversations to make sure that they're safe in all those different directions has made a huge impact, because it means that it's the same space that students can come in and ask deep questions or share what's on their heart, but it's also the same place where, they can throw a Spider-Man frisbee around or, just like see some silly cartoons and stuff like that. So all of those things to me make up student ministry. And so making sure that I always have access to that safe space for them to come is something that's really been important to me.
Yes, and I see the Spider-Man poster behind you. So yes, it
Yes.
looks like you're definitely a Spider-Man fan. And then there's two of them, right? I see one, the Amazing
Yes.
Spider-Man, and then another. Okay, yeah. That's great.
So it's just a tiny mini version of my office here at home. But yeah, same concept.
Nice, good deal. And Lydia, what about you? I mean, what have you seen happen as you meet with students one-on-one, and how do you do that in a safe way? And what's some of the fruit that's come out of it?
Yeah. I think it's so helpful to have that space where kids feel like the focus is on them. And especially when I'm like on a Wednesday night running program, it's pretty easy for me to get interrupted in the middle of a conversation. And so I want to reinforce with a kid that I'm talking to, like, hey, I want to actually give you my undivided attention. Um, we have a really strong coffee shop culture in the Pacific Northwest. And so when we're doing one-on-ones, we really emphasize like you're meeting in a public space and, um, you know, we want there to be like no question about what the vibe is. So, um, you know, if you're grabbing food, it's like a very casual food. It's not like, the sit down weird vibe dinner. But mainly I like meet kids after school and we'll go grab a cup of coffee or boba or ice cream in the summer. There's a little bakery that I recently found that has cookies and drip coffee and cider and tea. And so that one's a win because it was like $6 for both of us to get cookies and tea. And I was like, budget
Love that.
is
Yeah.
I
good for the
love
budget.
that.
So I think about places where it's easy once they're juniors and seniors and can drive and meet you there. And then if they're not very mobile, I try to make sure that I'm checking in with the parents too, like, hey, is it okay if I pick so and so up from school today? Or, if I'm communicating directly with the student, make sure your parents know what the plan is. Because if the family's in the loop, then that builds trust. And then it's also a great way to connect with a parent that you might not see a lot during program time. Saying like, oh, so and so cares enough about my student to meet with them.
Yeah.
And then in the midst of in that one-on-one time, it can be hard to get this conversation started. So sometimes I'll just kind of ask them for updates about their week, and that will turn into ways that we can be supporting them, or questions that they're going through, or drama with their friends. Sometimes we'll start by asking, well, how can we be praying for you? And that might bring something up. And sometimes it's just, the conversation meanders and then something real comes up. So it's all about kind of not forcing what you think the one-on-one needs to be about, but
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
Yeah.
letting students show up and then not being afraid to push the question deeper. I always
So
try to
true.
ask them, like, hey, so what are you thinking about God these days? And to just kind of normalize opening that as a topic of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think of one student after summer camp who really just had an amazing experience last year. And I saw him at church because I think that Sunday he went to the adult service and we were just chatting. And I was like, dude, we need to meet up and talk about all this stuff because we just had this fascinating conversation about all these questions he had, and it was just an amazing time. So then we met up for lunch. I think it was at In-N-Out or something like that. And then that just led to a lot of stuff that he was struggling with that he just talked about, and it really just that was the first time I had ever met up with him one on one. And that just provided so many other opportunities to really walk alongside of him and support him throughout his life. I have to be super careful now because I don't want to talk too much about personal things that students are going through, only because I just got back from winter camp and this podcast is so new. So I had told one of the students in my group about the podcast, and then he mentioned it on the ride up there, and then all of the boys in my car, they're like, hey, let's listen to it. So we listened to a couple of episodes, and then another leader got wind of the podcast, and their students started listening to it. So now I actually have a lot of leaders and students in our youth group that are listening to the podcast. So I don't want to disclose too much information about stuff going on. But I think the main point that I wanted to say there is that, yeah, I mean, sometimes those one-on-one conversations that you have when you meet up with students, it can just provide so many opportunities for them to talk through things that they're dealing with and open up different ways that you can support them and their family as you walk alongside of them in their lives.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, Lydia, thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate you. Lydia and I know each other from a youth ministry cohort that the Youth Cartel puts on. And Christian was also in our youth ministry cohort. He was our guest in the previous episode. So, Lydia, I don't know. I sent you the link. Did you listen to that?
Yeah, I
You did.
saw it. Christian did such a great job.
Yeah,
And it was fun to
actually, it was funny because the way that I introduced the boys going up to winter camp to my podcast was the first story that Christian had about the awkward middle school moment. And I'm like, hey guys, we're going to listen to this podcast and this specific episode because I want to just start it off as awkward as possible.
I love it.
And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it because it was definitely replaying that part of the episode. I was like, oh, this is very awkward. Anyway, and then Marco, of course, is our great leader of the youth ministry cohort at the Youth Cartel. So I don't know, did you listen to his episode as well?
No, I missed it. I'm really bad at podcasts. I'm trying to be better.
No worries, no worries. It is accidentally inappropriate. So he's got some really great stories. He's got a good story there, and also one that is I lost a kid but found him. He's also got one there. So Mikiala, were you there for that episode? I forgot because we
I
re-recorded
think
it.
we talked about it previously together, and then, but I wasn't there for the recording. But I will never forget
Yes.
that story. So,
Yeah, you were there for the first recording, but then we had to
yes,
re-record, and then when we re-recorded, it was just me because you weren't available.
right, right.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks again for showing up. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.